So Conor McGregor continues to make the headlines, as always, story of his life. But there was an interesting sort of little time away he had in Ibiza recently where celebrity and I suppose the world of organised crime collided somewhat. And McGregor, of course, met Katie Price while he was on this Ibiza holiday. There was some sort of a scuffle in a pub.
Yep.
And then he has posed for photographs with Katie Price, with Graham the Wig Whelan, who is actually dating his sister, and with two young members of who were, one of them is Lee Byrne actually, and he's the son of Liam Byrne. Liam Byrne, for anybody who doesn't know, would have been one of the leading members of the wider Kinahan organisation, and with a young guy called Nathan Biggie Little, who's not as young now as I remember him, but Biggie Little was named during CAB proceedings as a younger member of the sort of the Crumlin-based
organised crime group. Yeah.
So, firstly, what's he doing hanging around with Nathan Biggie Little, who is so much younger than him, is he not? And
well, he brought the whole Black Forge team over to Ibiza to celebrate their performance in the league. And obviously, Biggie Little has been a regular attendee at the matches. We've seen him there. And then there was other people. I mean, there was also two Irish internationals were also photographed with him. Troy Parrott being one of them, who would be a friend of Lee Byrne. Lee Byrne's no involvement in crime, as I said, but he would be a close pal of Troy
Lee
Parrott.
Byrne, of course, is expecting his first child with Lily Gerard, Stephen Gerrard's daughter.
Yeah,
to mix it all up another little bit.
Yeah, so more football connections. And Evan Ferguson was also there, but I don't think he was necessarily with that group. I think he was, but he was also in Ibiza at the same time. Evan Ferguson would also be an Irish international, contracted with Brighton and Hove Albion, you know.
So some interesting characters floating around in that whole mix then, really, and this centres on the Black Forge football team. And of course we have indeed photographed Biggie Little at this matches, along with, and which brings us into the, an update on the Nikita Hand case, but along with James Lawrence, who was a co-accused in the civil proceedings taken by Nikita Hand against McGregor and himself. A character, I suppose, that gave us a little bit of an insight to the world of McGregor.
Yeah.
Even the way he sort of went along to pick him up to go partying that day, really, that morning, and what had been going on. We got a little bit of a window into the world of McGregor from that. And this is a bit of a window as well. And in a way, McGregor grew up with these guys. He has, sometimes people will say about, McGregor was hanging around with them. You kind of go, yeah, but sure, he knows them. He was friends with them. They were kind of also sort of the parents, really, of Biggie Little, the next generation up, and Lee Byrne would have been his contemporaries probably in school and likely in sporting clubs.
Yeah, I think in Crumlin Boxing Club, where he would have started off as a boxer before going into MMA. Certainly David Byrne was, I think, fought with him at that stage. David Byrne obviously was killed in the Regency Hotel, but we a brother of Liam's. So there's absolutely connections all the way through. Obviously, Graham the Wig Whelan is going out with his sister, so there is that connection as well. That's a long-term relationship at this stage.
And he would be a far more significant criminal at all than Nathan Biggie Little, who people will not know who he is.
No.
He hasn't come to huge prominence in any way, really, other than being named in part of the CAB proceedings and being identified as a junior kind of member at that point of the Byrne organisation. He also featured a little bit when his cousin Sean Little was murdered in Coolock.
Yeah.
And Sean Little was murdered on the side of a road in Balbriggan. There was a kind of a flash point of violence out there, and it was all really centred on the fact that these younger crew, in actual fact, Sean Little believed he got a little bit of streets from his relationship with Nathan Biggie Little. And he was very confident of himself going out into that gangland world because he believed he had the protection of the wider Kinahan organisation, and he didn't believe or couldn't believe that anybody would take him on or take him out. His friend Zach Parker had been killed months previous, and then he was murdered, and within days of his murder. In actual fact, at his wake in the house, a third man, Hamid Sanambar, was killed. But Nathan Biggie Little and he were related cousins, and that kind of relationship had brought the Coolock and the Crumlin groupings together for a period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it was a period in the Irish underworld where young men like Sean Little could make great progress, because not only was there a lot of money floating around, but some of the more established criminals had been either put behind bars or had to flee the country as part of the policing of the Hutch Kinahan feud, and it created a bit of a vacuum. People like Sean Little and indeed Mr. Flashy sort of fill that void. Graham Whelan would be of another generation. He would have been somebody who was being investigated for Gardaí for well over 20 years. Obviously first came to prominence when he was arrested as part of what's now an infamous cocaine seizure in the Holiday Inn on Pearse Street, which was at the turn of the century and led to the fallout of that led to the Crumlin-Drimnagh feud. Graham the Weak Whelan would have only been a teenager at that stage, and he would have served, I think it was 6 to 7 years in prison. And when he came out, he would have been welcomed with open arms by the Byrne organised crime group.
Headed at that point, really, or certainly the visual head was Fat Freddie Thompson.
Yes, but probably overall headed up by Thomas Bomber Kavanagh from Birmingham. Graham Whelan would have moved between Birmingham and Dublin over the years, would have continued to be investigated by Gardaí, looking at the drugs trade and looking at the organised crime situation in Ireland, but ultimately would have avoided being imprisoned up until recent years, when he was done for a money laundering charge for a relatively small amount of money when he was caught in a hotel. After he came out of prison, he's certainly stayed away from any criminal offences and has instead become, I suppose, one of the McGregor entourage, it's fair to say.
He certainly has. And just to, again, Nathan Biggie Little, because this will be the first time our listeners have been introduced to him or heard of him. But he's always been at the centre of things in a way that is he's almost an honorary member, really, of the Byrne family. In actual fact, himself and Lee Byrne would refer to one another as brothers, and they're very, very close. He's holidayed. He's been on family holidays with them. He would have been somebody who visited Morris Signs, and we've spoken about him before, the multi-millionaire caravan park owner, with a colourful history and a very close connection with Thomas Bomber Kavanagh. He was at his house. He was at family gatherings with them. He's very central to the Byrne family, even though his mum is a woman called Tina Little, and he there doesn't seem to be an evident sort of father about, but it's like as if Liam Byrne is almost a father figure to Little, and that is really probably why he was one of those younger generation named within the CAB proceedings.
Yeah, he would be obviously very much part of the inner circle and would have been a very prominent at the funeral of David Byrne as well, right up the top with the family. He would have very minor convictions, but has come before the courts. But he was named, as you said, in the CAB case that was brought against the Byrne family at that point, which ultimately, with the seizure of Liam Byrne's family home, was one of the final results. But the CAB would have outlined what they believed was the structure of the Byrne organised crime gang, would have named some people at the very top, and then would have named, I suppose, what we would term foot soldiers at the very bottom, people that had much more minor roles. Nathan Little was named in that context. Now, this is belief evidence that's given by the Criminal Assets Bureau. It's not the equivalent of a criminal conviction for that, but it's evidence that is part of an affidavit put forward to the court. Yes,
exactly. Yeah. So interesting company, and obviously McGregor, back to McGregor, the non-criminal celebrity in this grouping, along with others. But he hit Ibiza by storm, obviously.
Yeah,
this group.
I mean, he hit Ibiza by storm.
Was he there on his yacht?
I don't know, but he paid for the whole team to come over.
Right.
So that's a huge look. I can't even say if there's 20 people and you pay for them all to visit Ibiza. You're racking up huge money, and that's.
But Katie Price just happened to be there as well, was it?
Katie Price just happened to be there as well.
And she was just posing with them.
She posed with them. I mean, there was other people who posed with them. People like Brendan Rodgers, the Celtic manager, was photographed posing with McGregor. So yeah, there is. He continues to live a celebrity lifestyle. Despite the fact that simultaneous to that, he's appealing a judgment in the High Court.
Exactly, which is what I wanted to get on to, because again, James Lawrence, who has attended all these matches, these football matches, he is his friend and was his co-accused in the case. Where are we at with that?
Well, what has happened? He's appealed. Now, the terms of the appeal, for want of a better description, are still there's still legal submissions being made in that context. So there's a hearing is due next month because Conor McGregor, while appealing the verdict, he's also sought to introduce new evidence, primarily two witnesses who say they believe they witnessed Nicola Hand being struck in her house on the night in the hours after she alleges she was raped by Conor McGregor.
Now, these people were approached by Pat O'Connell, a reporter, and they are a woman called Samantha O'Reilly and her partner called Stephen Cummins. Now, Nicola Hand has described the contents of the couple's affidavit as lies. And she said, my ex-partner Stephen Redmond did not assault me on the night of December 9th, 10th, 2018 and never assaulted me in the course of our relationship or since. And she also said she didn't want to speculate on why Samantha and Stephen, as she says, are making up these lies. Now, they're not in a position to come to court yet, or they're not needed. So basically, let's just describe what McGregor what McGregor is trying to do here is to introduce new evidence in his bid to either have that contained in a new trial. He's appealing in order to have it, like his, if you're McGregor, he wants the whole
verdict overturned,
right? Yeah. And thrown out. If that is the case, the appeal court, if they should do that, the appeals court can order a retrial. So this is kind of like, in the event of that, he's looking to have this new evidence introduced, which is unusual. And
it is unusual. It's not impermissible, but it is unusual because normally an appeal just focuses on issues of points of law. So obviously, you can seek to have new witnesses introduced, but you have to show there are certain conditions on why you're doing that. For example, one of them would be that this evidence wasn't available to the defence at the time the case went on. So that is what McGregor's legal team are seeking to do. Mark Tighe, reporter for the Sunday Indo, how they're also attempting to introduce a medical report from the former state pathologist for Northern Ireland, Professor John Crane, who has reviewed the CCTV evidence on the basis of knowing about this new witness statement saying that Nicola Hand had suffered a separate assault to Conor McGregor.
Just sort of explain that. They have an expert witness from the north who is assessing the CCTV from the hotel, is it?
Assessing the CCTV from the hotel, assessing the CCTV from the ambulance that Nicola Hand was brought to the hospital.
And that's in relation to this expert witness's opinions around the bruising, is it?
It's around the bruising. And
or if there was bruising there.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, McGregor's legal team have said Professor Crane was asked on the 7th of March to review evidence from the original case after the two new witnesses came forward. So he's been told these two new witnesses have come forward. They've signed an affidavit describing how they believe that Nicola Hand was beaten up, and he's now looked at the CCTV evidence from the Beacon Hotel and also from the ambulance and written a report about that, and they're seeking also for that to be admitted as part of the appeal. Now, Nicola Hand's legal team are resisting that. They're basically saying it is inadmissible. John Gordon, Miss Hand's senior counsel, has asked the judges to dismiss the report as inadmissible as it wasn't brought in the original trial and could have been, and the new witness that had come forward then. And he also described its evidential value as minimal and said it was not admissible under court rules. So this is what the appeal, we're not at the appeal, we're at this pre-appeal, I suppose, and the judges will make findings on all of this at a later point.
So what about costs? Are they racking up still in the background? If you're Nikita Hand, you still have to have your legal team there at every single pre-appeal hearing.
Yes, they absolutely are racking up legal costs, and legal costs, as we all know, are very significant. At the moment, this is an appeal, so if the appeal fails, obviously the burden of all of the costs would fall on McGregor. If it doesn't, things would be different. So that's the basic court rules. Now, judges have discretion beyond that, but yeah, it's racking up money, no doubt about it.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.